Republicans who oppose Donald Trump keep losing primaries. Let's look at why. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Now, before we get started, let me tell you about something, and you tell me if it sounds familiar. Yesterday, one of my sons came in and casually mentioned that, I splashed water on my brother, and he got a little upset and threw a cabinet door that he had been sanding. What he didn't say, the cabinet door shattered. Not great. was not exactly happy about this situation. Hopefully nothing like that has ever happened in your house. Hopefully your children just get along peacefully, but just indulge me for a moment and imagine a scenario where siblings don't always get along. Think about this situation and ask yourself this. Who's responsible? Well, obviously my one son shouldn't have thrown the door, and my other son shouldn't have sprayed him with water. So let's have a pause point. Oh, I'm mixing it up. We're actually having a pause point early. Remember, pause points are opportunities, parents, for you to actually stop the podcast and discuss these questions with your kids, because the tools we're learning about don't just apply to policy and politics, they apply to real life too. So let's ask this question. Who's responsible for the broken cabinet door? Now, that's a sort of a trick question because both of my sons are. If my son hadn't sprayed my other son with water, he wouldn't have thrown the door. Obviously, my son who threw the door was responsible for his actions. Now, whose responsibility should you focus on? Now this is a really important question because it depends on who you are. Now, when you're a parent, one of the joys of parenthood is you get to focus on both children. You've got to navigate that with both kids. But the natural response when you are one of the people involved in a situation like that is to focus on the responsibility of the other person. And I hope you can see why that's an appealing argument, because yes, the other person did something wrong. But just because it comes naturally or just because it's appealing doesn't mean it's a good decision. Maturity is actually being in those situations and then looking at my actions. What did I do? What could I have done differently? And there's a couple reasons for this. One, you are responsible to God for your decisions, not the decisions of someone else. And second, you can only control yourself. And when you understand this, it's a little painful at first because you're actually looking and you're saying, "Ooh, I did something wrong." But it's actually a really empowering realization because you realize changing the outcome doesn't mean this other person who I have no direct control of has to change. All that has to happen for a different outcome is for me to change. And so I want to encourage you is that even if you're in a situation where something's gone wrong and the other person is 95% responsible, look at your 5% and focus on fixing that. Now, there is a caveat here. If you have a friend who is eager to focus on your 5% instead of their 95%, that is a person you should stay away from, because this only works when both people are doing it. When both people look internally and figure out, what could I have done differently? That's a situation that leads to peace, that leads to solutions. And just a little life tip, when you are looking for a spouse, someday, not today, but someday, seek someone who takes responsibility for themselves. And of course, you also need to be someone who does the same. This habit is really important, looking at yourself and thinking about what could I have done differently. And here's something I know from experience. Habits like this don't just happen once you get married. Once you get married doesn't mean all your bad habits go away. No, they get exposed to another person that you are committed to. So start working now. Start working now on developing the habit of personal responsibility. All good habits must be cultivated over time, seeking the Lord's help and making good decisions. I encourage you to start this one today. All right, this is a bit of a unique podcast, and not just because sometimes I'll just randomly talk about stuff like that, but we are going to openly discuss the best ideas of the political left and non-Christians. We don't need to be afraid of those ideas. We can even acknowledge that those ideas have appeal, but what we're going to do is we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and find out where the mistakes are. Parents, this is really important for us to do together. I encourage you to listen with your teens or preteens because we need to equip our children to respond to the destructive messages that pervade our culture. We have to sharpen our arrows. All right, if you want to watch, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows. All right, the topic today. Are Republican voters too loyal to President Trump? Now, this is also a little bit different than what we normally cover because we're wading today into the political world and not just the policy realm. So let's have a pause point. What are some of the differences when discussing policy versus politics? What do you think? Normally we talk about policy, what policy is best, what we should do, what the government should do. And today we're talking about politics, how those policies get made. Well, there are many differences. I'm going to mention 3 of them. One is the time frame. Policy, we can think long term. We can look into the future and say, over the long term, what would be best? Politics is often very immediate and very urgent. There is an election happening in less than 6 months. That's a deadline. There's going to be a big push around that election. Second difference is when we're talking about the best policy, we don't need to compromise because we're simply identifying what should the goal be. In politics, compromise is inevitable, and that's a feature, not a bug of our political system. I want to actually have another pause point right here and ask, why is compromise inevitable and why is that a good thing? All right, so this seems like sort of a contradiction, right? We know what the best policy is, and then I'm saying, but in politics, we're going to have to compromise. And the reason is that we live in a country of 330 million people. There are a lot of different ideas about a lot of different topics. And so how do we all come together into one country or one state or one city or one community? And how do we work together when we have these different ideas? And some differences are substantial and some differences aren't as substantial. Well, it's compromise because I'm not the dictator. You're not the dictator. Your neighbor's not the dictator. And so when we get into the realm of politics, we're going to have to compromise because no one has a monopoly on the power. And that's a good thing because we don't want one person, one institution to have all the power. All right, third point here of a difference when we're discussing policy versus politics. Policy is about principle. We can identify what is the right principle and how should that be applied in this situation. Politics involves people who aren't perfect, and that's inevitable because Jesus Christ is not running for president. He has a much more important position. All right, and I bring this up because on Saturday, Louisiana held its primary election. And no, I actually don't know why they hold their primary on Saturday, but an incumbent senator, Senator Bill Cassidy, this is according to the AP, was decisively defeated in the Republican primary in Louisiana. He was unable to convince voters that he deserved another term, 5 years, after voting to convict President Donald Trump during an impeachment trial over the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. He finished behind Representative Julia Letlow, who capitalized on the power of Trump's endorsement as the president continues purging his party of people he views as disloyal. Oh, no bias there. And John Fleming, the state treasurer. Letlow and Fleming will compete in a runoff at the end of next month. Again, this is from the AP. The result was the latest example of Trump's unrivaled power over the Republican Party as he approaches the twilight of his second term, with persistent inflation, sagging approval ratings, and dissatisfaction over the war with Iran. Unlike some other senators who declined to run again after crossing Trump, Cassidy pushed hard for re-election and spent nearly double the combined amounts of his opponents. So you can kind of see the frame there from the Associated Press is that Trump has just this power, this control over the Republican Party. And the implication, of course, is that Republican voters are just blindly loyal to President Trump. And that's the kind of the idea I want to talk about today. And it wasn't just in Louisiana. Earlier this month in Indiana, a number of state senators lost their reelection bid. And what had happened is that Trump had wanted Indiana to redistrict. Again, this is a whole another thing that's going on, to redraw the congressional lines to give Republicans another seat in Congress after the 2026 election. And a number of state senators refused to do so. And so there was 10 who were running for re-election, because all the senators don't run every cycle. 10 were running for re-election. Two of them decided not to run for re-election, and another 6 were defeated. So that's 8 out of 10 senators who voted against what President Trump wanted with redistricting, who did not win re-election. That is staggering. As someone who follows politics closely, I can tell you that incumbents have a couple of really significant advantages. They have name ID, that really matters, and they have access to more money than challengers. And so for someone to defeat 80%, either through elections or just basically forcing them not to run for re-election, 80% of incumbent senators is really a staggering thing in the primary. And so, yes, President Trump obviously has a significant influence in the Republican Party. All right, so here is the argument. Remember, we always start with the argument that I personally disagree with, the wrong side. You see, these results show that Republican voters are blindly loyal to President Trump. Just look at the track record. A Trump endorsement equals a 90+% success rate for a candidate, including incumbents losing. We just talked about how difficult it is to beat an incumbent, and Trump just wiped out Republican senators in Indiana who disagree with him about one decision. Look at this grudge that Trump carried against Senator Cassidy over one vote. You see, that this level of success that Trump has had with his endorsements isn't people making their own decisions. It's a party enthralled to one person. Back in 2016, Trump was on the campaign trail and he said, quote, "I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? I can stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?" This makes Trump dangerous to the country. All right, let's have a pause point. Which of the great 8 questions would you use in response to this argument, this contention? As a reminder, the great 8 questions are questions we put in our mental toolbox to help us when we encounter policy issues or issues like this. Gives us tools to really dig into that issue so we don't have to accept it at face value. Question 1, what happens next? Question 2, has this been tried before? Question 3, is there a principle involved? Question 4, what are the trade-offs? Question 5, what do you mean by that? Question 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Question 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And question 8, what does the Bible say? Now, remember, just because I didn't select the question that you did doesn't mean you're wrong. The nice thing about these tools is they give you lots of different ways to attack an argument. But the question that I'm going to talk about first is question 2. Has this been tried before? Have we ever seen an example of a powerful politician use his influence and power to direct voters in lower level elections? Yes. Yes, all the time. Like, this is so incredibly normal. It's amazing to think about. What the AP is describing as almost this conspiracy, this shocking turn of events. No, this is what politicians do. This is what presidents do. This is what governors do. They endorse candidates that they like, that they think will be supportive of them, supportive of their issues, and they try to get those people in power. I live here in Nevada. We have a Republican governor, Governor Joe Lombardo, and he has endorsed a number of candidates in a number of different races. And that's just a normal part of politics. I think the more interesting question is, why are Republican voters so loyal to Trump? Because they certainly are. And I think it's worth digging into this because it kind of explains what's happened. And I know if you are a teen or a preteen, this might actually predate when you were alive, with which, yes, makes me feel extremely old, but I would like to just talk about it so you kind of understand why Trump is so wildly popular with Republicans. Go back to 2012. Republicans had just lost the presidential election. They ran Mitt Romney, very nice man, very impressive track record as a governor, as someone who saved the Utah Olympics, as a business leader. And Obama wasn't just a blowout, but Obama pretty well crushed him. And Republicans, after that election, did an autopsy. Oftentimes, political parties will do this after losing a presidential election. They'll look and say, what went wrong? What do we do? And the solution, the answer that the Republican establishment hit upon was Republicans are losing Hispanic votes. Hispanic Americans are becoming an increasingly large part of the electorate. And so we need to push amnesty, because Hispanic voters, they either came from Mexico or from Central America, or they know people. And so this is the issue that's holding them back from voting for Republicans. All right, so let's have a pause point. Do you think Republican voters supported amnesty? So this is kind of the establishment, the most plugged in, powerful leaders in the Republican Party. Not all of them, certainly, but many of them. They come and they say, we've got to push for amnesty. And this included Senator Marco Rubio, who's now Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He pushed what was called the Gang of Eight immigration bill, and that included an amnesty provision. So, and that bill didn't go anywhere because the Republican base strongly opposed amnesty. And so they stopped it in the House of Representatives. So in walks President Trump in 2015, decides to run for president. He's not just a no on amnesty. He pushes back on illegal immigration. He doesn't just want to stop amnesty. He wants to stop illegal immigration. He says that one of his big campaign pushes was, we're going to build the wall and we're going to make Mexico pay for it. And he talked about there was a young woman named Kate Steinle. She was walking along a San Francisco pier in 2015, and she was shot and killed by an illegal immigrant that had been arrested before. But San Francisco, being a sanctuary jurisdiction, had not allowed the federal immigration authorities to come in and deport him. And so Trump comes in. He doesn't just oppose amnesty. He comes in and basically changes the whole conversation around immigration, and doesn't just say, well, I've got to message it, I've got to nuance it, I've got to appeal to Hispanic voters. He says, no, this is terrible, and we're not doing it, and I'm going to stop it. And so I just want you to think about Republican voters. Their position actually has not changed. For decades, they did not want amnesty. They're very concerned about illegal immigration. And the power brokers in the Republican Party, not all of them certainly, but by and large, and for some various reasons that I don't want to just rabbit trail onto, but for some economic reasons, if you are a business person and you import a bunch of illegal immigrants, well, guess what happens? Your labor costs go down. And so it's good for you if you're running a company because your labor costs are going down. But if you are a Republican voter who's concerned about the culture, is concerned about American heritage, who's concerned about wages for people who are American citizens. There's some cross purposes there, but the leadership of the Republican Party was much more in tune with the interest of these business leaders who wanted the cheap labor. And so Trump comes in and basically says, I'm going to be your champion. I'm going to be the one to stop this and to fight and not be ashamed about it. I'm not going to tiptoe around it. I'm going to say, we're stopping illegal immigration. Oh, yeah, and we're going to make Mexico pay for it. There was also another big issue in the 2016 election. There was an open Supreme Court seat. Justice Antonin Scalia had died, and they were not able to. What was happening was Barack Obama wanted to nominate someone. Obviously, his nominee would have been a leftist judge, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said, no, we're going to hold this seat open until after the election. And President Trump put out a list of potential Supreme Court justices, a very good list, a very strong list, and he pledged to appoint originalist Supreme Court justices. You can say that he didn't do great on that, but one thing he did do is he, appointed justices that would repeal Roe v. Wade, which is a huge deal to a lot of social conservatives. And so then President Trump gets in, and not perfectly, because no one's perfect, but President Trump keeps his promises to the Republican base. He goes after the illegal immigration issue. He appoints these justices, not perfectly, but appoints the justices that overturn Roe v. Wade, which has been a pro-life priority at that point for almost 50 years. So yeah, when you go in and you champion a group of people, and then you keep your promises, those people are going to be loyal to you. And then during the Biden administration, after losing the 2020 election, the Biden administration sticks the DOJ on him. You've got these prosecutors in different states making up charges, twisting the law in novel ways in an attempt to destroy and imprison Donald Trump. And Republican voters took that personally. And then, perhaps even more amazingly, in the 2024 election, President Donald Trump won an increasing share of Hispanic and Black voters. Remember, go back to the aftermath of the 2012 election. All of the smart people in the Republican Party, not all the smart people, many of the smart people, and they are smart, they're bright. The political power brokers said the only path forward for Republicans is to pander to Hispanic voters by pushing amnesty. Here comes Donald Trump. Not only does he not pander on the issue, he says illegal immigration is terrible and we're going to stop it. Then he comes in and he dramatically reduces the illegal immigration. And this term, he's done it even more so than in his first term. And instead of this making him less popular with minority voters, it actually makes him more popular. So yes, it is absolutely understandable that Republicans would be loyal and appreciative of Donald Trump. Now, this claim that Trump could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, look, I'm not going to say that Trump is known for being careful with his rhetoric. He's not. That's who he is. That's part of his shtick. And when you listen to him, you're kind of filtering out a little bit of the crazy. All right, as you think about that, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Whether you are in the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. As every parent knows, raising kids can feel a bit like a ping pong game. You bounce from moments of joy to moments of deepest concern. Combine this with the busyness of life, and this back and forth can leave you feeling overwhelmed and even isolated. As the mom of 4 very busy boys, Charity knows this firsthand. It's why Mama Bear Prayers exist, to support moms who are on the journey of raising kids. God works through prayer, so check out Mama Bear Prayers today. All right, let's have a final pause point here. Why does it make sense for average voters to care about endorsements? Okay, we've kind of looked at the reason that Trump has been so successful, but there's actually kind of just a principle. We have this question in the grade 8 about Question 3, is there a principle involved? And I think there can be a sense for people who are super involved in politics to kind of look down on people. Oh, they're just following an endorsement. Okay, here's the thing. Most people don't have time to study all of the candidates in depth. It's not their day job. It's not their part-time job. They are paying attention maybe a few weeks before the election. Maybe they listen to talk radio. Maybe they listen to podcasts. Maybe they watch Fox News or MS Now. But most people are not living and breathing politics, and that's okay because most people have things to do. And I encourage you to do things and to be an engaged citizen, but also go do things outside of politics. But the politicians that you studied the most are running for the biggest offices, for president, for governor. And so if you found someone that you really like for president or for governor, you trust that person. And so then you're going to trust their endorsement. Doesn't mean you turn your brain off, especially if you kind of are only so on the person, then maybe an endorsement doesn't mean as much. But if you found someone you really like, then it makes sense that if this person, if this president, if this governor vouches for this other person, you're going to be more favorably disposed to them. And another reason that this makes sense for voters is that voters want people to support the top candidate they really like, because that president or governor is going to need support from other people to pass legislation because of the three branches of government. All right, this is just a random aside, and I just want you to put this in your mind. Store this away for a couple of years. The press has really gone after President Trump in just kind of incredible ways for almost a decade. But you mark my words, as soon as the next GOP presidential candidate emerges, whether that's Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, whoever that person is, the media will soon be describing him or her by saying, well, at least Trump wasn't as dangerous as this person. just watch. Just put it in your memory. Just put it in your memory bank. All right. I know this was a little more politically focused. I hope you enjoyed it. I encourage you to subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, or leave us a 5-star review on your podcast app. Thanks so much for watching. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.